Joining us this morning, Titania Jordan.
Tatiana Jordan. Did I get the name right? Jordan?
Titania.
Titania. Okay. All right.
It's Titania Jordan.
Hi everyone, welcome to Connect. I'm Titania Jordan, and today I am joined by a very special guest on a very special day. It's actually our very first show in the 3CI studio, and who better to join me than Nzinga Shaw, affectionately known as Zing. And may I call you that for this interview?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. It's such a cool name.
Thank you.
Please tell us your title.
My title is an interesting title. It's Senior Vice President of Community and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Atlanta Hawks and Phillips Arena organization.
So a two-part title for two different, very, very conglomerative organizations.
Absolutely. And you know, when I started at the organization, I had one job. I was brought in as the Chief Diversity Officer to handle a crisis that our organization was facing 2.5 years ago. It was a really tough time. But I think over time and after working in that role and being able to connect many dots, I was able to branch out and start to really serve the community in a real way. And so my boss found it necessary to put me in charge and responsible for community in addition to the diversity role.
So can you touch more on that and the challenges and then the opportunities that you faced in that role early on?
Absolutely. So when I started working at this company, we were in the middle of a racial crisis involving our controlling owner and our general manager.
Wow, that's sticky.
It was really sticky. And so I was working at Edelman at the time. I was overseeing diversity and inclusion in a PR agency and got a phone call from Alston & Berg, a big law firm here in Atlanta.
I'm familiar.
And they said, listen, we have a client, and we can't really tell you who this client is at the time, but we can tell you that they're a big sports organization in the Atlanta area, so I knew it could only be one of 3 organizations. And they said, they're going to face something in the media, and it's going to be very public and very ugly, and we think that you have the expertise to help and add value to what they're going to be facing. Do you mind coming into our office? And so I ended up meeting with the CEO of the Atlanta Hawks, Steve Koonin, and also their he's their head lawyer, Scott Wilkinson. And they told me about emails that they had come across and also audio tapes that they had come across in which senior members of the organization were making racially disparaging remarks towards the African American community. They were basically saying they didn't want African Americans to come to the arena as fans. They thought that this group of people were rowdy. They started fights. They just, they went on and on. And so they asked me, they said, do you think that this information will become public? And I said, what happens in Vegas ends up on YouTube. It will become public. So, I said, listen, you have to lead from the front and you have to lead the public with this story. Tell your own story. Mm-hmm. We saw something very similar happen at the LA Clippers when Donald Sterling was outed for making remarks to his girlfriend about African Americans. And so this was really on the heels of that situation. And to me, I thought that it really highlighted the fact that there might be issues throughout the NBA. And so I told the Atlanta Hawks that they had an opportunity to lead from the front and tell their own story. And so I ended up joining the PR team, worked through the crisis, and decided that I wanted to work in the organization and really take this work on as a full-time job and really see it through, not just get through a crisis and do something as a bandage to cover a wound, but really heal the organization and see how we could proactively lead in this space. And so I've been doing this job for the past 2.5 years now.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
So Zing, it sounds like a beautiful, seamless story. Obviously there was a lot of hard work involved. What were the first steps to go about managing that crisis?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question because on my first day of work, it was not like your traditional first day of work. Usually when you start a new job, there's flowers on your desk, people are excited to see you. When I started work, there were civil rights activists picketing in front of the arena and people were mad at our team. It was a tough time. And so the first thing that I had to do and that I knew that I had to do was to win over the public. And the only way that you can win over the public is by engaging them in an organic way.
Yes.
So I started a diversity and inclusion council, but the council I started is quite different than councils that I've been on because this council included members of the community. So usually diversity councils are made up of employees.
Well, and not only that, but that it's a nice phrase people like to throw around to check a box and fill a blank, but I think you really took it to the next level with authenticity, so I definitely want to hear more about that.
Thank you. Yeah, so we started this council. We engaged people in the public that show up in different ways. So we have people in the LGBTQ community. We have people that are Jewish, people that are handicapped, people that are not married, people that are married, people that own businesses, people that don't have a job at all. I mean, we really tried to think about who lives in the city of Atlanta and how can we get everybody involved. And so when we did put the council together, eventually there were 20 members. 10 were employees of Atlanta Hawks and Phillips Arena, and the other 10 were these type of constituents that I was just talking about with you. But such a strong, good group of people that were committed to doing the work. And so we divided ourselves into 3 work streams, and we worked across internal engagement, which is all about how employees feel. How do you get employees to come to the company? And once they're there, what mechanisms do you put in place to make sure that they're going to be successful? The second work stream is fan experience. So, you know, thinking about everybody that comes through Phillips Arena, whether it's for a Hawks game or if it's for a concert, how are we making sure that we're appealing to multiple audiences? You know, if you're handicapped, can you come to Phillips Arena and have a good experience?
So important.
Right. Or if you're a gay couple and you've decided that you want to hold hands and have an affectionate night at the arena, will you be mistreated or will you feel welcome? So we want to make sure that everybody feels welcome. So we put that committee together to make sure that, you know, anybody can come to the arena and have a good time.
So on that note, I was in LA yesterday, and I was sharing a green room with a very prominent African American actor. And he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Atlanta." And he said, "You know what I love about Atlanta? It's in the heart of the South, yet they're one of the only cities really in America that have both overcome racism and homophobia." And I was like, you know what? You don't hear a lot of people saying that about any city at all. And the fact that somebody not from Atlanta is saying that about our city just made me so proud. And I would like to think that you and your initiatives are probably a large part of forming that opinion of our city.
Well, that's lofty, and I appreciate you for saying that, but I think, you know, Atlanta does have a deep history in this space. It starts with Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, which was born in Atlanta. And Atlanta is the home of civil rights, and it's the city that's too busy to hate. And I think that over time, people have realized that we can be progressive even if we are in the South. Atlanta is also one of the top cities for the LGBTQ community. We have the second largest pride parade in the United States. The Atlanta Hawks happen to march in the Pride Parade for 2 years in a row since I've been there. But not only march, we design our own float. We get very active with the community. And there were 70,000 people that showed up to Pride last year. And I think it's going to continue to grow. So, you know, whoever that gentleman was that you were talking with, he's absolutely right. And that makes me proud because I do know that this city is progressive. And when you think about everything that's transpired in the United States, particularly over the past year with the presidential election and with law officers and civilians going back and forth fighting and killing each other, it's just been a hard time. And so for Atlanta to lead in that way and to take that torch and say we're going to show the country what we can do and how unifying and sticking together actually works in your favor, I think that's important.
So not to name names, but just to give a hint, he will be filming the new version of Dynasty here in town soon. So when that comes out, you'll know who I'm talking about.
I'll know exactly.
Very nice, very kind gentleman. If you're watching, by the way, hi. You're really cool. Really like what you said about our city. Now, Zing, your title is not only just boss level cool. It's also the first of its kind in the NBA. Talk about that honor.
It is. You know, when we were discussing whether or not to implement this role, I wasn't in the job at the time. I was still a counselor from Edelman, giving counsel to the Hawks. And I came up with the idea myself, and I said to the boss, I said, you need somebody to manage this because it's such an opportunity to lead the way with change.
Yes.
Not only change for the Hawks organization, but change for the NBA. If no one else leads the way, you know that you have the key in your hand. You've got to be the one. And at first, he was a little, hesitant to implement the role. But then, he claims after discussing it with his wife at home, she was able to really rein him in and say, you need to get this job implemented. And I think it's been the best decision for all of us, for our organization, because we're getting involved in work that we have never touched before. We're getting involved with communities that we have never touched before. You know, Atlanta has such a large Hispanic population. 1.2 million Hispanics live in Atlanta, but yet we don't have a large Hispanic fan base.
Interesting.
From the diversity and inclusion role, we've started reaching out to the Latin American Association, groups like Alpha, and now we're starting to get really engaged into that community. And so, and not only that, but we're having bilingual workers, and we're really thinking about how we dimensionalize our workforce. So diversity and inclusion, I think this role being implemented here was important, and the NBA ended up following us. So they hired a chief diversity officer 6 months after I started my job, and his name's Orris Stewart. He's an amazing guy. We work together on a lot of initiatives, and so the two of us are collectively trying to get every team to have a chief diversity and inclusion officer.
That's a very admirable and attainable goal, and I'm so excited to just see the efforts, you know, started by you. It's just so awesome.
Thank you.
So Zing, whenever I get to meet and talk with people who are very inspiring, I'm obviously extremely curious about their background and even little things like when you were a little girl, what did you want to be when you grew up? Is this where you thought you'd be?
No, I did not think I would be a chief diversity officer when I was a little girl.
Nor did I think I'd be interviewing you and when I was a little girl.
Right. I grew up as an only child. Both of my parents were educators. And so they taught me the value of education at a young age. And so I always wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to impart knowledge to others. I was very intellectually curious. I used to read a lot.
That does not surprise me.
I like to do anything that involved learning a new lesson. And so it's funny because while not in a classroom and teaching students in the traditional way, I still feel that I'm a teacher. I do a lot of training. I do a lot of learning and development. And I feel like I'm helping people understand the value of diversity and how they can implement it in their lives. So, you know, your title doesn't have to be teacher in order for you to teach.
Absolutely not.
Your title doesn't have to be, you know, doctor in order for you to take care of people. So I try not to get caught up in titles. I really try to actually get caught up in the work.
That's a very, very good point. Good way to stay focused. Speaks to your leadership qualities. So Zing, I clearly admire you very much. Love what you've accomplished so far, and I'm curious to know what's on the horizon. What are some of the big goals you have in mind, both long-term and then short-term?
Yeah, you know, long-term goal, I'd love to see every NBA team have a chief diversity officer.
Yep.
If I can help lead the way and get that done, then I know that I would have made my mark and done the right thing for the league. Mm-hmm. Short-term goals, you know, that we have a couple of platforms that we've started. One is called AmaZZZIng, which I'm very proud of. It stands for Model of Shaping Atlanta Through Inclusive Conversations. And we started it out as a session for dialogue, and really just wanted to tackle certain issues around race and gender or sports as a catalyst for change. I'd love to see AmaZZZIng become big. I'd like to see AmaZZZIng, you know, we've had great speakers. We've had Bakari Sellers, Sanae Simpson, Dominique Wilkins, Takeo Spikes, the list goes on. A lot of A-list celebrities when it comes to sports and entertainment, but I'd really like to see that platform extend throughout not just basketball, but throughout all sports, because I think sports can serve as a catalyst for social action. I think that, you know, no matter what people are going through or how they're feeling at the time, you can turn on your TV and watch a basketball game or a football game and root for the home team and really get excited about it and talk to different types of people about it and hear their level of emotion and excitement. So to me, sports is that one unifier that can bring a group of people together. So I'd love to see us implement AmaZZZIng in different organizations and get that to be bigger.
I love that. Nzinga Shaw, or Zing as I love to call you now, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being an inspiration to fellow women in this city and humans across the nation and what you're doing in sports. And we just thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It was so good being here.
So great to have you.